Hey there, Andrew here from Black Panel Press and thebookmarketer.com, and today I want to talk to you about something very important: pricing. So specifically the 5 times price rule. So I'm going to get into it, explain a little bit about it, and hopefully it'll start to make sense. So in business, there are a bunch of different pricing strategies when we're trying to come up with how to price our product. So the first one is probably the most basic. It's called cost plus pricing. So what you do there is you just calculate your costs and then you add a markup. So for example, if your printing costs are $5 a book and you have a 100% markup, then you're going to have a price of $10. When it comes to books, comics, and graphic novels, I'm actually going to recommend that you mark those up by 500%, so 5 times, which we'll get into a little bit further. The next method is competitive pricing. So here's where you're going to set a price based on what the competition charges. So, and this actually will come in handy for a lot of different reasons, especially for marketing. You're going to want to make a list of comparable titles. So these are other books, comics, or graphic novels similar to yours, preferably published within the last couple years with a similar sales volume, similar page count, similar audience, and similar price point. Something I've also done is calculate the price per page of some of these comparable titles. So in case my page count is a little bit different than these other comparable titles, that will allow me to kind of extrapolate and figure out what's the corresponding price for my book. For example, if it was 200 pages, my comparable titles are 150 pages. One thing you do have to keep in mind is people do understand that indie books cost more, and so they have a higher price attached to them. And so oftentimes you can get away with a higher price compared to your comparable titles by making it clear that your book is indie or alternative and that it's a short print run, or that your company is a small independent company. There are a couple other pricing strategies, some of which are not that relevant when it comes to publishing, but we'll get into them anyway. So one is price skimming. This is where you set a high price and then you lower it as the market evolves. So it's particularly useful for new technological products. In publishing, though, it does have its uses. Keep in mind that most of the time your distributor is going to require you to print the price on the back of the book. And the scannable barcode is actually going to include the price embedded in it. That means it's going to be very difficult to increase the price later on, because if you have a book with a $25 price stickered on it, that's going to mean it's going to be very difficult to raise the price later on after you've published your book. If you have a book that has a $25 price stickered on it, and then you try to increase that to $35, everyone's going to wonder what's up, the retailer, the customer, and so you're very likely to lose sales that way. So if you have any doubt, price a little bit higher than you otherwise would, and you can always go back later and reduce the price. You can offer special discounts to your customers. You can offer discounts to the retailers or the wholesalers. And ultimately, you can re-sticker those books, and then that will make a lot more sense to everyone involved if there's a new sticker with a lower price over the higher price that was originally printed on there. Next pricing strategy is called penetration pricing. Not really relevant for publishing, in my opinion, but this is where you set a low price to enter a competitive market, and then later on you can raise it. So again, I can't really think of any area in publishing where this would apply. Maybe with textbooks, I think, because you're going to have new editions that you can raise the price every year. Other than that, though, for the most part, the market is not really going to accept that with books because novelty is so important. So if a book comes out with a low price point, people are going to expect it to keep that low price point or lower. Finally, the last pricing strategy is called value-based pricing, which basically involves basing your product or service's price on what the customer believes it's worth. So there's really no constraints on what this could be. And I think the most extreme example of this would be pay what you can. Sometimes you offer a product or service and you just ask the customer to pay whatever they think it's worth. And so that's probably the most extreme example of that. But in order to determine what this price is, it'll take some testing. And sometimes you can run things like A/B tests, a book with a $35 price versus $25 price, see how well it converts if people are willing to go for that higher price. I've done this before on Amazon where I've had a book available for $25 and for a period of a couple months, and then later increased the price to $35 and just observed what is the conversion rate, how that was impacted, and found that actually in this case the conversion rate only dropped very slightly even though the price is significantly higher. So in that case, I determined it was worth it to charge the higher price. Another thing you can do is just asking customers. People are not always honest, but you can ask them in polls and surveys, what do you think this is worth? So a lot of different ways that you can kind of determine this. And the more unique your book is, the more you can follow this type of pricing strategy. And I notice this a lot. Certain types of comics and graphic novels, especially if they're limited edition. So sometimes when we have variant covers, also with card games and board games, especially now that this trend has exploded on Kickstarter, some of these games, even card games, are going for, $130+ I'm sure there are some that are even higher than that. And that's just because, the creator of that game or that comic is able to create the demand to support the price, get people really excited about it, and so they can charge higher than the average. So here's where we come to the meat of this video, which is the 5 times plus price rule. And so I added in the plus recently because I was having a chat with a fellow creator, and it just felt like this was something that needed to have a little more precision to it. So that means that basically you want to price your comic or graphic novel at least 5 times the printing costs, or higher if possible. So I'll run down through some of the numbers that are involved in calculating your margin when you're publishing a book. The biggest expense for me is the printing expense. So that's usually between 15 and 20%, almost always for me. And so 20% should really be the high end of what you're going to pay for printing. Actually, the biggest cost is not really a cost, it's more of a discount, and that goes to your distributor. Depending on your distributor, that discount will be between 55 and 60%. With Diamond Comics, it's typically 60%. And so that represents the biggest cost when you're calculating from your cover price. Next, we have our advertising, which is not actually necessary. There are a lot of different ways that you can promote your comic or graphic novel using organic methods like social media and email marketing. And those can be really super effective. I say this in some of my other videos, that giving away your comic or graphic novel is probably the best way to promote it. And a lot of the times the market will respond better to things like reviews and organic content than it will to paid advertising. So it's a lesson that I've learned the hard way by spending way too much on advertising, but now have kind of toned that down and focus more on organic marketing. Next, we have our royalties. So if you are a publisher and you're paying royalties to an author, usually those royalties as a percentage of the cover price are going to be between 5 to 10%. So that's going to leave us with a 10% profit margin left over. So basically means if you follow that rough guideline, then you're going to be making about a 50% return on investment. So for every $100 that you invest in publishing this book, you're going to get back about $150 in revenue or $50 in profit. Now there's a lot that can go wrong in this process. You might end up overprinting or underprinting, and you might end up spending more on advertising like I did many times in the past. And so that profit margin can very quickly and easily shrink. So between overprinting and underprinting, I would always prefer to underprint, because then at least you're going to sell out of all your copies. You're going to maximize your profit per copy sold, and then you're not going to be left with any excess inventory, which again, inventory that doesn't sell. I've had books that have remained in the warehouse for sometimes years. The storage costs on those add up, and they'll eat away your 10% profit margin. One of the benefits of working with a distributor is that they're going to be able to provide you with sales estimates, what they expect your book will sell over the next, say, 6 months to a year. And then you can base your print run off of those estimates in order to minimize the amount of leftover stock. In my case, if I think I'm going to sell 500 copies according to the estimates from the distributor, I would usually print probably 600 to 700, because I know I can sell some copies at comic festivals and I can sell some online as well. Maybe I'll do a Kickstarter campaign and sell a few copies there. So I do like to have a little bit of an extra margin, because you really don't want to be in a position where you have tons of orders and you're not able to fulfill them because you haven't printed enough. But trust me when I say that that's preferable to the situation where you have 2,000 or 3,000 copies and they're not selling and they're going to be stuck in a warehouse for years. So let's go over a quick example here. So a book that I published earlier this year, the cost on that book was $3 per copy, and the price was $20 per copy. So it might seem a little bit greedy sometimes when you look at it that way. And a lot of people do tend to look at it that way, but they don't understand all the other costs that are going into things. All right, so let's look at it by channel. So from our distributor, that's going to be your worst profit margin among all the different channels that you can sell comics and graphic novels. However, it will be the greatest volume. So you actually, even though our margin is significantly lower through Diamond Comics, through our distributor, the volume is very significantly higher than any other channel, really all the other channels combined. And so what we're interested in is our total profit, not the margin necessarily. So 10% from the distributor. From Amazon, if we sell directly on Amazon, then we're going to make about 26%. There are numerous different ways you can sell on Amazon. So the distributor can do that for you. You can do it directly. So that I won't get into in this video, but another video. From your website, usually on our website at least, we're paying probably about $5 to $10 for shipping for online orders. So our website profit margin is about 37% because we are selling at full price on the website. We do offer sometimes some special discounts, but generally you want to keep your public price on your website the same as what the retailers are going to charge. Otherwise, you don't really incentivize them to sell your book for you. Next, we have festivals, which comes in at 62%. So the margin is the highest of festivals, but that is not including the travel expenses, which will vary very significantly between different festivals. If there's something that's in your hometown, the travel expenses are going to be very low. You're going to do very well. Your margin is going to be very high because you're only booking the table and maybe taking a taxi or driving up to the festival, setting up the table. So there's not much in the way of expenses. But if you're on the East Coast and you have to travel to Comic-Con in California, well, then you're talking a significant amount of expense. And sometimes people will not even recover their expenses from festival sales when they're having to travel like that. It can be worth it anyway to get the word out there about your comic or your brand. But generally, I tend to avoid those festivals that are too far away. I don't mind breaking even, but I'm not willing to lose money on festivals personally. And then lastly, with Kickstarter, we have a profit margin of about 32%. So very close to the website. You'll notice website being 37%, Kickstarter is 32%. And that's because Kickstarter charges a 5% fee of all the pledges that you receive during your campaign. But the difference between your website and Kickstarter is that Kickstarter, while you do have to promote your Kickstarter by running, you don't necessarily have to do paid advertising, but you do have to promote it some way through social media or email or paid advertising. Kickstarter will also bring a lot of backers to your project because people are actively on Kickstarter searching for things that they're interested in. So all that to say, if you price your book at about 5 times the print costs, but making sure that it's competitive with comparable titles in your market, you'll have a good chance of making your profit not only through your distributor, but through all the various channels where you can sell your comic and graphic novel. I hope you liked this video and that you got some value from it. If so, please hit the like, subscribe,